Well, hi again, everyone. Welcome into UnAnchored Boston as we transition from April into May. But that doesn't lessen the load that's coming on the Boston sports scene. It's the greatest time of the year. And as always, we are brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things in camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, and the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. All right, back by popular demand, the one and only pride of North Cambridge, Cambridge Rindge and Latin, UMass, the Natural, the Herald, the Athletic, you name it. The Buck is here. Steve Buckley is back again to enlighten us. And Bob Lobel, take the formal introduction. All yours.
Lynchy, thanks, and Buck, welcome. If you hear any like pounding in the background, it's RV campers. They're building a camper right outside my window. So, and it's meant for you, Steve. So we'll get to that a little later. But if you hear that pounding, no, it's all about building a new RV. One of the great things about having Steve Buckley on, and I mean, come on, he's gone from the Westfield Times, whatever, Citizen, print, all the way to
I just love the way you just poo-poo it, the Westfield, whatever.
No, I'm not poo-pooing. I'm just saying
big time,
everybody had to start somewhere. And, once we got outside the womb, it was all about where we're going to start. And you happen to be, whether it was UMass Amherst, but certainly Westfield, and then through the Herald, and then on your way to, as Mike mentioned, the Athletic, which seems to be the premier source of most things these days, and like an all-star lineup of writers. And we can talk about the future of newspapers in your own mind a little later on in the show, but that's one of my questions, obviously, since I brought it up. But this is an amazing time. I mean, you get Celtics, Bruins, even the Red Sox at the draft, and even Lionel Messi. And I'm not going to ignore the Lionel Messi phenomenon that happened this weekend in Foxborough, because we're missing a boat somewhere. If they can set a record of attendance in Foxborough for Lionel Messi, we're missing something, because we don't obviously talk about it enough. But having said all that, Steve, this is an amazing time of the year, and it's just an amazing place to be at this time of the year when you throw in the marathon and all the stuff that's gone on with Caitlin Clark leading up to this whole scenario. We live in a sports paradise.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, you didn't mention that the Elite Eight was played at the Garden. We got to see
right.
UConn's, and I covered a couple of those games and was just enthralled by UConn. And what a likable team it was. So that's number one. Number two, slight correction with Lynchy. I take umbrage when it said that I went to Cambridge Rindge and Latin. I went to Cambridge High in Latin.
Cambridge High in Latin, you're right.
Rindge Tech was that other school.
Of course he's right. You're wrong.
was that other school on the other side of the library. In 1979, I think they merged them into Cambridge Rindge and Latin. And this is not what I'm here for, but nothing upsets me more than reading an obituary in the Herald or the Globe, and they do it all the time. I don't know if it's the desk, if it's the grieving family. They'll say he or she was a 1941 graduate of Cambridge Rindge Latin School, and which is like saying Fernando Valenzuela pitched for the Brooklyn Dodgers, or that it's just that,
Steve, you don't have to worry about reading it in your obituary, okay?
I'm gonna live forever, right? Good point. And no, but I've left with my family. This is in my head now. I'm gonna tell them, make sure it's Cambridge High in Latin, that it's not
right.
it's not Rindge in Latin.
You had Kevin Clark and Gene Walcott at Cambridge Latin, and Billy Hewitt, Patrick Hewitt, and those guys went to the old Rindge Tech. Eddie Culhane was the basketball coach at Rindge Tech.
Well, this is where it gets complicated. Eddie Culhane was a gym teacher at Cambridge High Latin, but was the basketball coach at Rindge Tech.
Okay.
So
everybody got that now?
No, for those of us in Ohio that really don't give a damn about any of this stuff, it's okay.
So to answer your question, yes, it is a great time of year to be a Boston sports fan. It's a great time of year to do what we do for a living, because it's action. It's fun. I mean, just over the last week or so, I will travel with the Bruins and Celtics when they get to the second round. I generally don't travel in the first round just because the NFL draft, opening day at Fenway, the marathon. This year, the Elite Eight being played at TD Garden. So I didn't travel the first round, but I mean, there's just so much going on, and it makes us hustle. It's energy. It's electricity. It's just there's nothing worse than being in our business and sitting around kicking around ideas. What do you want to talk about? Because there's nothing to talk about. Here, there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question about it. And, it does go on in other cities. There are other cities that have two teams, a hockey and a basketball team playing, but somehow we think that ours is more special than any other city. I mean, people gravitate. First of all, people are coming into town for the marathon and they stay for an entire week. That's something different. And this soccer phenomenon, I mean, 65, I never thought I'd see 65,000 people for a soccer game in New England.
Yeah, and I didn't get there. I wanted to, but again, for what we just talked about, there was just so many other things going on. I've always been a soccer follower in that I covered it at the aforementioned Westfield Evening News, and I covered it up in Maine, and I've always enjoyed the sport. That I haven't covered it a lot is just because of what we already talked about. When you have we have the Bruins, Celtics, Red Sox, and Patriots constantly elbowing their way to the front of the room for attention. And, there was a stretch of 7, 8, 9, 10 years where the four teams were all selling out. Patriots, Celtics, and Bruins, I believe, still do that. Not so much the Red Sox, but, I mean, they're averaging 32,000 fans. So it's not like they've gone to pot. So when you've got those four Goliaths demanding attention, it's hard to get down to the revolution. I've done features here and there, but I'm hoping, like a lot of people, that we do get a soccer-specific stadium over by the casino. I guess Route 99 in Everett is the place they're talking about right now. I know that there was a Widget Circle, whatever, like Widget Circle, where they were going to build the Olympic Stadium, was under discussion at one point. I remember Kraft meeting with Marty Walsh about that. There was talk assembly over in Somerville. But I would love to see a stadium, a 26,000 seat stadium right in the city.
As if there's not enough traffic over on Route 99 already, Now
well, that's a fair point. Well, we're well practiced from all those. And by the way, people always say, what's the worst part of your job? The worst part of my job is getting home from Patriots games, and it's been like that since the old stadium. Now, this is not to say I do not like the Patriots. I don't like covering them. I love covering. I mean, it's football is the number one game and will be for a long time. But it's just, and getting down there is fine. Being there is fine. Talking to the players is fine. Belichick was fine. I mean, once you figured it out that it was all a carnival act, it ceased being offensive. It's just what he was. But then you get done, and unless you hang around for a long, long time, you remember Gil and Gino would just, when the game was over, they'd set up shop in the back room. They'd play checkers, talk, read the paper. They wouldn't leave for a couple of hours because of what we're talking about here.
Well, since you were on to Belichick and the Patriots, let's start there. I actually watched Bill Belichick for 6 hours on YouTube with Pat McAfee. And
except for the first 10 minutes you couldn't hear.
Yes, exactly right. I thought there was something wrong with my TV. And so he was up there on the big board, and he might have been some of his best stuff. Who knows? But
he looked like the guy doing the weather.
He was moving all over the place. But I tell you what, he is very comfortable with Pat McAfee. And as the night went on, he got better and better and better, and he finished with a bang. He was really, really good.
It's funny you should say that, because I read lots of critiques and reviews and heard lots of talk on the radio and print and everything. And I was pleasantly surprised by all the good press, because I only saw the first half hour or so and was not impressed, because I was there to write about, we had talked at the Athletic earlier in the day about, okay, Buck is going to focus on Belichick. And then, well, we have two full-time media writers, including Andrew Marchand down in New York, who's just about the best there is. And so a decision was made. He was going to focus on Belichick, which is what his job is. And I focused on the actual draft. So once I watched from 7:30 to 8:10 maybe, which was when Belichick started. And then the first pick of the draft, you know, they have the national anthem and the color guard and all that stuff. But once they got to the Patriots pick, I was off to the races with Drake May. So I didn't see Belichick after that. And I did hear he got better and better, as you pointed out, as the night went on.
I think that the positive reaction to Belichick, correct me if you think I'm wrong, and I know you will. Positive reaction to Belichick was part of the fallout from the dynasty. That most people felt, but
yeah, no, I couldn't.
Most people felt Belichick was harmed by the dynasty and was done wrong by the dynasty, and had a good sympathetic following after that show, that documentary ended, and therefore, you know, took the positive vibes into the McAfee studio. Not that he wasn't great on his own, and because we knew he would be, because it was a totally different environment for him that people would see him in. I mean, I've talked to some people ahead of time. I told them, don't worry, you're going to see something you've never seen before when you see Belichick in front of, away from the press court at Foxborough. And he delivered. But I do think the dynasty sympathy had a lot going in for Belichick. He has pretty much the sympathy, especially after he didn't get the job in Atlanta. I
think the dynasty thing blew up in Kraft's face. I don't know what he was intending to convey, what message he was hoping to send out. If people were going to think his candor was cool, they had a press conference that I covered, and which they call the parting of the ways. I don't like using the term because that's just a euphemistic way of saying we fired the guy. They fired Belichick. Belichick got pushed out. And they had what I called a make-believe harmonious parting of the ways. And make-believe in that we knew there was friction. We knew they didn't get along. And they sat there with through the motions. Hey, this is great. This is okay. They have agreed, I put it, to part as friends. Even though they weren't, they've agreed. And that's what I wrote. And I said, okay, they're just gonna, because it's not good to carry the hostility. It's not good to carry grudges. You don't want to be doing that throughout your life. Well, Kraft had already, I assume, been interviewed for the dynasty by that point. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
And he does the interview. And one of the things that well, obviously the Odin Lloyd thing, saying that if you did it, we'd get you a good lawyer. You must have had a reason. I have no idea where that came from. And that's number one. And number two, going back to Cameragate or Spygate back in 2007, he resurrected the old story that he went up to Belichick on the field and said, on a scale of 1 to 10, what advantage do you get? He said like a 1. And then Kraft is said to have said, well, then you were a schmuck. And that made the rounds back then. I forget who first reported it, but we never heard Kraft say it. It was always that murky in the weeds. Did he say it or didn't he say it? We kind of assumed he did. And again, I apologize because I don't know who reported it first. But then he said it in the document. It's like he had it in his back pocket. He had it there. It was something that he was going to roll out, and he did. Well, if he's already had this mutual parting of the ways, and they parted as friends, and I can't wait till you come back, and it's going to be, Bill Belichick statue and all that. Why would you feel it necessary to call him a schmuck in this documentary? I've never understood that. I can understand him saying it back then because that's real. It's substantive. It's the two men talking, and it got out by whatever means it got out, and that's fine. But to hold it all these years and then save it for just that right moment, I thought was inappropriate on his part. And Lobie, I think you're 100% correct. I think it did usher some sympathy for Belichick. Not that he needed it, because I'm one of those people who does believe he's the greatest coach of all time. You look at the defenses they rolled out with Bruschi and all, the interception by Ty Law, which set up the Super Bowl victory in 2001. There were some great defenses there. Brady and Belichick came together at the right time and went down that road for years, and together won 6 Super Bowls. That's the story I'm sticking with.
And it's a good one to stick with because it happens to be fact. It's not rumor. It was fact. I would jump ahead to this year's draft, and since everybody's offered opinion before the draft on who was going to be taken when in the mock drafts, and then they give grades after the draft, which are totally ridiculous because it's all based on speculation anyway, because you have no idea how these guys are going to do. What is your speculation on Drake May versus others?
I mean, I like him. I mean, I'm parroting the words of others here. I like him based on what I read. I don't have an eye for watching film and always flat-footed, and he didn't find a secondary receiver. I don't have an eye for that. And some of the people who claim to have an eye for that, they don't either. But that's okay, because we're in the business of rolling out opinions. So the people whose opinions matter to me thought that he was the best guy, and they got the guy that people's opinions who matter to me said they should get. And he handled himself well at the availability, the live interview on the stage on ESPN. He handled him well. About 25 minutes later, there was a Zoom session with us that I sat in on, and he was comfortable in his shoes, prepared for the moment. Then they showed the clip of him getting on the private jet, and he was like, "Oh, I thought that was cool." So, not that kind of body language and quippy quotes adds up to an NFL quarterback, but I think he's off to a good start.
What do you think, Lynchy?
Well, here's again, I'm going to bring Belichick's analysis back in. Mel Kiper, by the way, I mean, no one can match his encyclopedia of knowledge, but or his hair, but he has everybody going to Canton, Ohio. I mean, the 199th pick, guy, great upside, great footwork, like this, great that. Belichick started right out of the chute with Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick. Watch this. I don't know why he runs out of the pocket so fast. He's got to learn how to stay in that pocket. Watch his feet. He doesn't square his shoulders up when he throws the ball. Then we go to number 2. We go to the LSU quarterback. Good guy, strong arm, but, he's not going to get away with this stuff when he gets to the NFL, blah, 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 blah. Drake May, pretty good throw right here, but watch this throw. He's got to stay in the pocket. Problem with him, he just hasn't had enough big games. So it was refreshing to hear that, unlike everybody else, every other draft analyst, here's a guy from Troy, the 5th round pick cornerback, great upside, great speed. He got a nose to the football. He's going to be a player. I mean, everybody's headed to Canton, Ohio, and it was refreshing to hear that a different opinion from Belichick, especially on the first 3 picks.
Okay, and yet you hear Belichick talk about like Steve Diossi, who's a long snapper, and he'll talk about Steve Diossi as though he's the greatest football player of all time. Second place would be Zach Diossi. I mean, Belichick loves long snappers. He loves guys that are in the front lines. He likes Bruschi guys. He likes defensive guys. That's what his focus is. He's never said this, but I think he regards quarterbacks, why he recognizes that quarterbacks, I mean, it's the most important position of any sport. I think we all recognize that. But I think at the end of the day, he regards quarterbacks as sort of divas and pretty boys, and he likes putting them in their place. And I'm probably overstating that. But I do agree with your larger point, which is that he offered some counterpoint to the points being made by the stargazers. I would agree with that.
Yeah. I'm going to expose myself here because I don't know what and I can, not in a literal sense, but I mean in a pejorative sense that I don't remember what he said about J.J. McCarthy, who I would have picked as J.J. McCarthy. Again, disclaimer: no knowledge, Bob. Okay, stupid Bob. I would have picked J.J. McCarthy solely based on the level of competition that he played, as opposed to Drake May in North Carolina. J.J. McCarthy played against Ohio State in the biggest college rivalry you could possibly imagine, and I think he acquitted himself. But talk about lack of knowledge. This is my exposure, none. So that's who I would have picked. But I really was interested because I pretty much did not hear what Belichick said about J.J. McCarthy.
Well, what I would say to that is that everybody has their, I think, Lynch, you pointed out, everyone has their post-draft report card. So we're going to have to get, like the Athletic, which their mock draft goes 6 rounds. It's crazy. And they have people whose full-time job is the mock draft. And I'm proud to say no one's mock draft is better than ours. And I say that only because there are just so many people involved in it. And I'm not one of them. But they have a mock draft. They give out grades to each team. They rank them 1 to 32 based on their mock draft and how these teams would over. I think they had the Bears number 1. They got their guy, but they also did some good picking. The Patriots, do with this what you will. Patriots came in number 8 out of 32 teams. The receiver they got, is it LePoke? I forget the full name, but Chad Graff at The Athletic had a great piece on him the other day, that he's somebody that they're counting on because they've had trouble. I was a big Thornton guy, Tyquan Thornton, a few years ago because he had this blinding speed, which is true, but you also got to catch the ball and run routes, and that's been an issue. So if this guy turns out to be a top-line NFL receiver, well, that's what we're looking for there because I'm old enough to remember Jim Plunkett and the poor guy getting you guys saw Plunkett and the dislocated shoulders and the porous offensive line. And if you've got that institutional knowledge of having seen Plunkett just get destroyed because they didn't have a good, this is pre-Hannah now.
Right.
And if you saw Plunkett getting blown to smithereens like that all the time, then you have some sympathy for this kid. They did draft some O-line guys, but they've got to rebuild that front there to protect their quarterback. And I don't know if they've done that to NFL specs, but we'll see what happens.
Belichick, we've all heard the story. Maybe we all haven't heard of how they made the trade for Randy Moss. And so Belichick just opens up. He goes, hey, we tried to get Randy Moss. Now the draft first round is done. He says, and I'm on the phone with Mr. Davis. He calls him Mr. Davis. He said, "Look, we're gonna."
I remember that Mr. Davis part. That jumped out at me too.
Yeah, and he says, and Davis says, "Look," he says, "you got to restructure his contract. You got to get him a physical, and you got to find him, and this all has to be done by noon tomorrow. Good luck. It's your problem, not mine." And Belichick says, "So I get Moss's number. I call him up. I said, Randy, this is Bill Belichick. Boom." Phone. Belichick slams the phone down. He goes, he hung up the phone, didn't believe me. Call him again. Randy, this is Bill Belichick. Who is this? Who's starting to prank? Who's pranking me right now? Click, hangs the phone up again. Call a third time. Look, Randy, and I was going to hang up after this. He says, Randy, it really is Bill Belichick. Don't hang up the phone. He said, are you kidding me? Well, Coach, how are you? He goes, listen, we're going to make a trade for you, but you got to get to Boston. You got to pass a physical, and we have to restructure your contract by noon tomorrow. He goes, well, I'm in Houston right now. And this is like 1 o'clock in the morning. He says, but I got access to a plane. So Belichick says, so he gets on the plane and we get him to Foxborough and we give him a physical. And Belichick goes to the guy next to him and feels his forehead for a temperature. He goes, okay, you've passed the physical. And it was just like that. And it was hysterical. He says, we sat down, we negotiated the contract and we had everything done by 8 in the morning. He goes, and the kids, and then Moss says to me, where's the playbook? He says, well, you don't have to worry about it. We're in the middle of the draft right now. He goes, I want the playbook because when I go out in that field with Tom Brady, I want to know as much as he knows, because if I don't know as much as he knows, he's not going to throw the ball to me. I want to know everything. And so he said we had a great relationship with him. He's one of the smartest players I've ever had. And then, at the end, he's begging McAfee. He says, look, he said, let's do this again sometime. How about if I come on your show on Monday afternoons during the regular season? How's that, right? And McAfee goes, really? Done. It's a deal. Okay, beautiful. So he was off and running. And I think he's really going to embrace this year in this whole media thing.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys again. What about J.J. McCarthy? This is my last chance.
Belichick loved him. Belichick, of the 4 quarterbacks, first 3 in him, Belichick loved him.
It'll be an interesting parlor game moving forward, because if you're a fan of any of these teams, you're going to watch your guy, but you're also going to be doing twisty turns to watch the other quarterbacks, and one of them will be better than the other. I mean, that's just the way the math works. This guy will be up here, and that guy will be, and one of them, may be the next Mac Jones. Who knows? And no disrespect to Mac Jones, so I think got screwed New England, but that's a different story. But we will be following these other quarterbacks. I did want to point out that the Belichick story I did hear, and it was quite revealing from me, because I remember covering that, and people in sports collect all kinds of stories and anecdotes over the years, not the media people, but the people, the players and coaches and stuff. And they need to decide how much of that they're going to roll out over the years. Some they'll say right after the game, some comes out at a banquet later on, and then they wait for the right moment. The story he told about the hang-ups from Randy Moss, I had never heard before. Now, I haven't checked with Borges and other writers who would have been covering the team back in 2007 to see if that got reported. I don't remember hearing it. I did a one-on-one with Belichick for a book I wrote, and I went through and he agreed to talk to me. It was over the phone. And I asked specifically about that. He did tell me about the chartered plane, and he was in Houston. He came in the next morning. Kraft had told me that the old story about Randy Moss came into his office, and I said, this shirt says Patriots on it, but to me it says Kraft because this is my family, and that's kind of stuff that Robert likes to say. I do remember when I ran that by Bill, I said, well, Kraft said that he brought him into his office, and he said, this is, and he just, whatever. That's all that crap. I mean, he wasn't that was, Kraft's version of the events, and Bill had, and this was a year after it happened, 08, 09, when I wrote the book. I think it was 08, so it was just a year later. And so they were through one dynasty and on their way to the next one, and there were no particular hard feelings in public involving Bill and Robert, but he did sort of bat that one out of the ballpark. I love the hang-up story, though. That's good stuff.
It was classic. Twice he hung up. He almost hung up a third time. And I got the feeling that Belichick, if Moss hung up the third time, Belichick was going to say, "I'm done. I'm not doing this crap." And
Steve, one of the book. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, this is something that's very interesting, because this is what popped into my head. If you're really famous and you call people, does that, and the person isn't someone that you have like a close relationship with? I mean, if I'm sitting here right now, Louis C.K. does a whole bit about, he says he got a phone call from Obama. It's just a comedy bit. And he said, I don't believe you're Obama. It's a made up story. He says, well, call the White House and ask for me. But when famous people call, like if you're Bill Belichick and you have to call the cable guy, granted, I'm sure he has people who tend to these matters for him, but maybe sometimes the people who tend to these things for you aren't around and you want to get a damn pizza. And you said, yeah, it's Belichick, B-E, yeah, sure, and I'm the queen, and then you hang up the phone. That might be a fun story sometime, famous people who get hung up on.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about the book you wrote, Steve, about best Boston sports arguments.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
That will make the next round. Yes.
But go ahead, Mikey. I don't want you to jump in. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think that's a great idea. Go for it.
I will go for it right after I tell you about campers.
Okay.
Cold Spring campers. Okay, Buck. They must be close to finishing because they haven't pounded away. But
now, by the way, I heard the Ordway show, which was really good. He's got all his pipes going, and he's relevant, and he's energetic. You guys promised him some kind of big ride in the RV.
Well, here we go. Now, don't rush. Don't get ahead of us here, Steve.
And you asked him, like, who's the one person that he would want to
Steve,
ride?
Don't get ahead of us here.
And he said Belichick. I just want to say, I would say if you asked who's the one person you wouldn't want to ride with, he'd say
Steve, don't get ahead of us here.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Finish what you're going to say.
I would say who's the one person he wouldn't want to ride across the country with, and I would say it would be me, because he used to always make fun of me for all my long, boring stories. So I think he'd throw himself out the window. You remember Tony C that night in Detroit?
You spent a lot of time with Ordway on the radio too. It was really,
Yeah.
really, really good stuff. Okay, don't get ahead of us here, Steve, because you're involved in this as well. So here we go. Campers, it is back. Cold Springs RV Campers kickoff event has returned. And this year, for the first time in the history of kicking off camping this season, all current year models are on sale. All current year models, all month long. It's May Mayhem. That's what we're going to call it. May Mayhem at Campers, Cold Springs RV Campers kickoff. Each and every 2,000, hear them? Each and every, it's either a woodpecker or the campers building a camper. Each and every 2024 model picked to get you your best RV for your best camping season yet. Go visit, no pressure, in the dealership with a huge selection. If you're looking for a new camper, you'll be blown away by the selection and the price. May Mayhem at May, our first ever Campers Showcase kickoff event. Okay, now I'll turn it over. Now we're up to speed, Steve. This is going to be your moment to reveal your darkest secrets. Steve, Lynchy will set it up and you can take care of it.
All right. You probably recall the last time you were on, Steve, we asked you first of all, Cold Springs RV is in the building stages of building a Lobel Lynchy cruiser, very similar to what John Madden had, because he didn't fly. So we are going to give our guests, when this thing is built, use of a Lobel Lynchy cruiser. You get to drive cross country in it. Now, last time you could pick anybody alive, past, present, but we're gonna narrow it down this time. You can pick anybody who appeared on the show The Dynasty, and that's anybody. That's Kraft, Ernie Adams, Ty Law, anybody. The detective from the New Jersey State Police, anybody that appeared in The Dynasty, ride shotgun as you drive the Lobel Lynchy cruiser cross country from Cambridge, Ringe, and Ladden all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and we'll fly you back. Who would you pick to ride shotgun?
Randy Moss. As long as I could get Randy Moss in the documentary, because he was on point. He was animated. He's like a movie star. He's right into the camera. He knows how to do that turn, like one eye, just like this, and the information was good. I think Ordway said, Belichick, I get a little tired of if you're alone with Bill. I've heard him say it. I've heard the Aussies. I've heard Smurla say it. Oh, if you spend time with Bill, he's the funniest guy in the world. I just wouldn't want to deal with his dry humor and so forth for 3,000 miles, because I don't have that relationship with Bill, and I have not been privy to those funny moments. So I will take those learned gentlemen at their word and assume that Bill's got the lampshade and he's dancing on the table and the whole bit. But I would like to, because Randy to me is such an interesting guy, and the relationship he had with Brady was two real football savants that existed on a similar plane. I always remember the Giants game, the last game of the regular season, not the Super Bowl, when they were just like playing catch with each other and breaking those records. Yes, I would want Randy Moss as my co-pilot.
Yeah, he was. In fact, we talked to Jeff Benedict, who wrote the book Dynasty, and we talked to him about the miniseries, and he said one of his big regrets is that they didn't get Randy Moss on more. They just had so much stuff they left on the cutting room floor, and Moss was a guy that if he had to do it over again, he would have given more airtime to Randy Moss.
You know who you should get on your program at some point? Karen Gurigian, longtime Herald football writer.
Yeah, she's great.
She's now at Mass Live, and football players always cozied up to Karen and told her their secrets. And I can't say how many times you'd go in the locker room at Gillette and Randy would, no, I'm not talking. And then it'd be off in the corner with his head down, and Karen would be, and they'd just be talking for 20 minutes, mostly off the record. If Randy Moss ever does a book, I don't know if he's done one. I would love to hear that Karen's involved in that, because she easily knew Randy Moss better than anybody in the Boston media.
She's been great. We've had her on a couple times. I might mention that Cold Springs RV is located in Ware, New Hampshire.
Where?
Well, Ware, New Hampshire. It's just west of Goffstown and north of Thingsboro. It's in that. Okay, you got it.
Well, Bell went for that one, didn't he? Right?
I got it. Karen's been great. Okay.
You have a bill, Bob, is there a bill collector at your door?
What, because
No.
of this guy out here?
Sounds like someone's knocking
I
in the
told you
door.
what was happening. I told you they were pounding would be, they're building a camper, or it's a giant woodpecker. I'm afraid to look outside.
I think it's a bill collector.
Well, it could be. That's the third option, but you know what? Let me just I can actually mute this part now that I know how to do
No.
this.
It's good. That's an ambiance to the show.
Oh, good. Well, I told you that. I could play music next time.
You don't
Okay,
get this in a
best Boston
TV.
sports arguments.
I'm all for that. You don't get this in a TV studio. That's why.
No, you don't.
Right.
Well, you didn't get it in your TV studio. You have no idea what went on in mine. I'm just telling you. We're also going to talk about one of them. Don't let me forget this, Lynchy, because the old-time baseball game is Buckley's invention,
Yes.
and it's a great event. Now we'll talk. I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about it in the context. Please remind me after we get through the Boston sports arguments. But I want to talk about that event, Steve, in context of where baseball is today, in its overall popularity and its draw as a drawing card. Not as an old timer, not as one of our guys, but it's the way it is today. But we'll get to that in context of the old time baseball show or the game that you put on. Now let's go into the sports arguments thing, which I've been trying to get into for the last 20 minutes. You co-wrote the book, and I can't remember who with, but I do remember. So talk a little bit about how you came up with the best Boston sports arguments and what you might even add to that after you've written that book.
Well, the book was written with the late Jim Capel, and he was a Seattle sports writer, and he was offered the book and by his agent. And he said, I know the Red Sox, but I don't know the Bruins, Celtics, and Patriots that well. And so he was a good friend of mine. And Jim passed away last year, but he asked me if I would go in 50-50 with him. And it turned out to be a very nice arrangement for both of us. And we divvied up. He did all the Red Sox stuff because he really knew the Reds. He was a longtime baseball writer. I did the Bruins, Celtics, and Patriots. And you kind of caught me off guard because I wrote that book like 15 years ago. And I don't have it in front of me. I have a copy up in my office. But I think an argument that I would add now would be to rank the 12 championships this century. And I've been at all those clinching games. There's only, in Lynch, you're out of the circle of trust, by the way.
No, not if I come back.
Now, you've got 2 months to do it because the Bruins and Celtics, we'll see what happens with Porzingis and the Bruins goaltending, but we could have another championship in 2 months. And as of now, the only 5 people, I think, in the picture, it's me, Shaughnessy, Jim Davis, Steve Menard, I believe, or he's out now.
Steve's out.
And you, and Amo, Joe Emersino. Well, Emersino has left the business. He's running the family real estate empire. You're, whatever you are, semi-retired. Jim Davis retired. And I don't know if I mentioned Barry Chin from the Globe. He's still active. So
It's 3.
if there's another championship to be won, it'll be me, Shaughnessy, and my understanding is Dan is doing quite well. I heard him on your podcast last week, and he sounded great. So you would have me, Shaughnessy, Barry Chen, and if you want to hop on as ace correspondent for CVB, get on it.
Well, what about this show? Doesn't this disqualify me as, or do I have to
No,
go?
but if you are physically there, to
Oh
see
my
the
God!
championship
Can you guys
won.
just talk about what we're talking about, sports arguments, instead of
No, but
applying
if
for
you
jobs?
well, no, this is a big. Don't be throwing like little codicils. If you are physically at the game when the championship is won, then you get to remain in the circle of trust. Otherwise, no.
Okay, that's
Okay,
fair enough.
so my updated sports argument, Lobby, and please don't be upset.
I
Tangents.
can handle it. Don't
I
worry.
live for tangents. That's what Ordway always hated about me. I would say that the next big sports argument would be which of those championships is the whatever term you want, biggest, best, most memorable. And to me, there's only two that you fight over, which is the Patriots first in 2001 and the Red Sox first since 1918. I think everything else would be a fight for third place, but it's 1A and 1B with those two. That would be my sports argument.
And who could argue that? I mean,
Yeah.
Super Bowl '1 and World Series, for all intents and purposes, #1 in our lifetime.
And the thing I remember about 04 was I was in the football press box at the old Busch Stadium, which was actually a good press box. It looked over first base. So I was looking right down on first base. And a lot of times writers go down to the clubhouse in the top of the ninth so they can get in there and get their interviews and stuff. And I remember Bob Ryan from the Globe was seated to my left, and nobody had left that press box because everybody wanted to see with their own eyes something that an entire global population had come and gone since the last time the Red Sox won a World Series. There may have been a few, 108-year-old people, whatever, who were there, but I doubt it. 86 years, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes and not on a monitor downstairs outside the clubhouse. And nobody left the press box. That's my big takeaway from that. And then and I had similar feelings in New Orleans when Vinatieri kicked the field goal, and I had a good vantage point for that one. And those are things you don't forget. Some of the other ones, Bruins, they upset Vancouver. The smart money anyway was on Vancouver. 08 when they came back and annihilated the Lakers in that clinching game at the Garden was big. And only two, I think, of the championships have been won in Boston. Was the Celtics over the Lakers in 08 and the Sox over the Cardinals in 13.
Cardinals. No, that was in the road.
The one in 13?
In 13, yeah.
Yeah,
13.
04 was in St. Louis, 13
Yes.
was at Fenway.
Yes, yeah.
So all those championships more or less have been won since we wrote that book, I think. And it's an ongoing discussion. I think a better thing is to rank them from 1 to 12, like which one's the biggest one. And all right, so there's Lynchy, there's Jim Davis, there's Shaughnessy, there's me, and there's Ammo, and that's so Menard was out by then. Okay.
Yeah. They we had a news director wouldn't send him to one of the Super Bowls, so that it wasn't his fault. It was
Funny.
So
yeah, I would without question, like you having grown up here, the Red Sox thing it trumps them all. But having grown up here and seen the futility of the Patriots over the years and all the crazy things we've seen, I don't want to call it 1A. It'd have to be number 2. The Red Sox 04 was number 1, but a very close second was the Patriots winning a Super Bowl, because I didn't think those words would ever pass through my lips in my lifetime.
the reason and you're right, I would go in that order also. But the reason the Patriots are so close to being number 1 is that I remember the 60s. I remember the games at Fenway, at BU, at BC, and would they play a home game in, was it Birmingham or
Birmingham? Don't forget their last season, Harvard Stadium.
I was at the Vikings game.
How did they get around the encampments to play football?
Yeah, I was at the year they played at Harvard Stadium. I was at the Vikings game and the Bills game, and that was the year Harvard let them use the stadium but not the locker rooms. And this is a true story. The Patriots dressed at the Homestead Inn down by the Fresh Bunch, the Stanley Teven traffic circle. I know that because I'm from Cambridge, but otherwise known as the Fresh Bunch traffic circle. There was the old Homestead Inn right there. and the Patriots players dressed there, but they weren't allowed to use the beds. The deal they struck with the hotels, they can come in and dress and change and use the shower, but don't upset the beds, otherwise we'll have to remake them. And this is the first year they were in the NFL. This is not the AFL. This is the first year of the NFL. Harvard grudgingly let the Patriots play there under the premise it would only be for 1 year while they got the new place built down in Foxborough, what became Schaefer Stadium. And shame on Harvard for being so tough on the Patriots.
Harvard Stadium was where Bob Gladgio was, right? When he got called out of the stands?
Called out of the stands, and he was in the opening kickoff.
No, Harvard Stadium was where MIT placed the balloon. Okay,
Yes.
under the watchful eye of the Harvard Security Department. That's where MIT ran the balloon under the stadium, dug up the turf. Nobody noticed it, and that's when the balloon went up. That's where Harvard Stadium was.
That's true.
Okay? Let's talk about Harvard Stadium for what it's really known for.
And it was not at Harvard Stadium that Lynch kicked the 21-yard field goal. That was Yale.
No, that was in his backyard over the arbor fence that his neighbor put up.
they like this.
Jesus, I heard the story 100 times. Let's face it, MIT at Harvard Stadium was what made Harvard Stadium. Okay, end of that story. What about the old baseball game and how it relates to baseball today? I'm sorry, Mike.
We celebrate the baseball game we play in Cambridge is a celebration of baseball meant to bridge the gap between today and the many, many yesteryears, and all the college and former pro players who participate in the game recognize that it's a competitive game and that it's modern rules and fastballs and helmets and real baseballs. It's not like the guy in the top hat standing behind the pitcher's mound. It's a real baseball game. But the uniforms are meant to celebrate all the different eras. I'm proud to say Bob Lobel once did the 6 o'clock sports live from home plate at the old time baseball game. And I wish I had time to dig it up off my phone, but there's a great photo. The year Clemens pitched in the old time baseball game. Someone took a picture from third base looking across the field, and along the fence behind first base, you can see Clemens is in his windup, and you can see me, Shaughnessy, and Lynchy. And I remember putting that on Facebook, and I wrote Mike Lynch, Dan Shaughnessy, Steve Buckley, Roger Clemens, 4 guys who combined to win 354 major league games. And the game's a lot of fun. It'll be August 21st or 22nd. It's going to be one of those 2 days. And we're still talking about getting a former Red Sox player. Last year we had Fred Lynn. We had the late, great Tim Wakefield, who pitched an inning and pitched a shutout inning, allowed 1 hit. And the 1 hit he allowed was to Ray Bork. And I'd been trying to get Raymond to play in the game for years. And when I told him we had Tim Wakefield, he said, I'm in. Because it turned out that Raymond and Wake were good friends, golfing buddies. And Bork had always wanted to face a knuckle. There it is.
Wow.
4 guys who combined to win 354 major league games.
Hey, what do you do? Travel with all these pictures with you? You just take all these pictures with you?
Buck gave me a heads up ahead of time, so I looked at them all.
Oh, okay.
Well, Bob, you can look those up on your phone and you can type in the approximate date and it will take you. You know how that works?
I've heard that. I haven't mastered it, but I've heard you could. Let me just fast forward to present day. And I know it's not quite fair to use the Red Sox present day as a measuring stick, but it is a measuring stick in many ways because most people just don't care the way they used to care about baseball.
No, I think it's entirely fair to use the Red Sox as a measuring stick because until a few years ago, we would say that St. Louis and Boston are among in New York, cities that really still put baseball on a pedestal. Even so, let me say it this way: when I was doing radio at EEI, even in the mid '90s, football season did not begin until the Red Sox ended. If it ended in late September with them not making the playoffs, that's when the season ended. Right. If it ended with them losing to the Yankees in the ALCS, that's when the season ended. If it ended with them in the World Series, that's when it ended. And then we would focus our attention on the Patriots. yes, the Herald, the Globe, you guys would all be down at Foxborough for training camp, but not to the degree they are now. And I can tell you from having done this for many, many years, the day that Belichick rolls up, in this case Mayo, when he rolls out the bag of footballs that first day of training camp, that's the number one story in town. And football is done, and I give them all the credit in the world. They've done a fantastic job of making football a year round. I mean, they turn the rollout of the schedule into an event.
Yeah. How about 300,000 people in Detroit?
Oh, I mean, and really, it was almost like a parody of itself with the national anthem and the color guard and the Lions coming out because and they turned it into a festival. They turned it into a dose of Americana. This is what our great land is all about.
The commissioners become the stand-up comedian,
and
the commissioners become, they plan to be booed. Okay, and he loves it.
And every player gets a big wet kiss and a hug from the commissioner. And I always want to say he's going to suspend you in 4 years over something you don't know, something that hasn't happened yet. And the schedule to me is the greatest because first they tell you who they're going to play next year, but you don't know when. So there's a whole cycle of news. Oh, they're playing the Cardinals next year. They're playing the Packers, and then they have that whole thing, but we don't know when. And then they announce what date, and then we have a whole day of that. Mini camp, rookie camp, veterans camp, guys who are coming out of retirement camp. I mean, it's just and if you look at the people covering it, they're really good at what they do. We have Chad Graff from the Athletic, and he's like all over this stuff. You got Andrew Callahan and Doug Kyde from the Herald, Nicole Yang from the Globe, and she's I just ran into her yesterday in the street, and she's talking about this guy in the 4th round taken by the Packers who has tremendous. I mean, these people are incredibly talented, and it's what football has done to turn their product into a year-round event, and good for them.
I didn't know they had a new position, Edge.
The Edge,
Edge.
right.
Isn't a member of U2 called Edge?
Sure. But,
no, I think he played in the band with Springsteen.
But another one is the scouting combine, and I've only been to one. And someone told me, and I won't say who because I don't want to embarrass them, but you walk around the scouting combine, and every team has like 25 people there, and they're all like the young guys, and they go to the gym, and they're all scouts, and they want to be the next Wolf or the next Belichick, and they're cool guys. And the way it was explained to me is the more team swag they have on, the lower their job. So if it's a Patriots cap and a Patriots shirt and Patriots amulets and stuff like that, but the higher you go, the less stuff they wear.
That's never stopped Mike and me.
So, but I had never been to the scouting combine until not this one, but last year, and again, it's an event. And Indianapolis celebrates it. What does the great state of Indiana have? They have Notre Dame football. They have the Colts, and they have the scouting. They have Hickle Fieldhouse, and is it Hickle? Is that what it's called?
No, Pickle. It's now Pickle, named after pickleball.
Hickle, and they have the scouting combine, and it's something that the good people of Indianapolis are justly proud of because they roll it out as a big event every year. And baseball doesn't have. You mentioned
the NCAA basketball tournament,
Indy 500. Yeah, Indy 500.
And oh my God, yes. Did you cover the Super Bowl in Indianapolis?
You
guys
bet
were there.
Yeah, we had the media.
Did you go to the media event at the Speedway?
Spectacular.
Did you get your picture taken on the bricks down there?
Just seen the bricks, yep. Right down. It was awesome.
Show us that picture, Mike.
That's one I don't have on the phone.
Oh.
I don't think I had my iPhone by that. I think I was still using a Brownie.
That's right.
You know what?
It's like we all got our pictures taken on the bricks, and then the year they played the Eagles at Jacksonville, we all went to. Is it Sawgrass?
Yeah, hitting the ball on the island green.
And everyone got one swing.
Yeah.
And the aforementioned Karen Garrigan, I don't want to tell tales out of class, I think Dino Hook won. And
I'm sorry, you can tell that one.
Have you had Dino on yet?
He won't come on.
This would be like the three tenors. Come on, you
No.
gotta
Listen to this. No, Steve, Mike, tell him the story.
He says, I'm done with that business. I don't want to do it anymore. It's in my rearview mirror. It's in my past. I will not come on.
Oh God, that would be fantastic. That'd be like the 5 living presidents all standing.
Well, he's out there building the camper right now.
So I think Dino Hook won, and then Karen jumped. And Karen is a great athlete, and her chums for days. I think chums, and she stood up there and put one right down Broadway, and everyone was like that. And there was definitely those who can and those who can't. I think one of the New York Jets writers, I'm trying to think of who it was, put one right down the middle, but I didn't even bother because I'm such a bad golfer.
Well, the prize was a cruise for 2. Whoever got it on the green and closest to the pin.
Yeah, I don't think Karen won that, but we would have heard that.
I'm glad you told me that because I was going to ask her to play golf this week. So that's good. I'll know that. I'm not going to ask her now.
No, Karen's the goods when it comes to golf.
No, Karen is very good. Did you know? Speaking of golf, when we were at the media event, we went in the Great Pagoda, which is where the finish line is, and they had cheeseburgers and beer and da da da. But inside the track it's an 18-hole golf course. 9 of the holes are inside the track. The other 9 are outside the track. Did you know that?
Sorry.
I did not know that. And by the way, I had never been there before. I didn't realize how. In my head, I'm thinking it's like Suffolk Downs. I swear to God.
Yeah.
And you're going to drive in. There's a parking lot, and you see the track. And we got the cacks here, and we drove through an underpass.
Underpass, yeah.
And I said, so when do we get to the Indianapolis Speedway? He says, you've been in it for 10 minutes. And I realized because I'm just a goofy kid from Cambridge, and I never covered auto racing before.
Yeah. Well, you've been to Fresh Pond. Now you've been to the golf course inside the Indy 500.
Time out. I want to ask the goofy kid from Cambridge, just as we're running out of time, but I did promise to talk about your feelings about the history of the future. I shouldn't say history. I know what the history is, but the future of newspapers. Now that you've gone from the Westfield Evening News, thank you very much, the Westfield Evening News to the Athletic, through the Herald and whatever. It's not a bright outlook, is it?
Well, there's 2 ways to answer it. It's not a bright outlook for the print edition because the various coffee shops I go to, and I'm a big connoisseur of indie coffee shops, and used to see stacks of newspapers everywhere, and Heralds and Globes, and I could tell you which ones there'd be more Heralds and Globes and which ones there'd be more Globes and Heralds. Now you never even see one, and so that's the bad news because we've got a whole generation. And I don't read the print editions. I read the Herald and the Globe every single day. But I read the e-editions, which I subscribe to, and it's the actual print edition, and you can read it like that in your iPad, and it fulfills my quest to read my local newspapers, and I love both papers. And the Globe isn't what it used to be, but it's still really, really good, and they invest a lot. They cover Boston real estate. They do lots of things. Mass Live. Mass Live was what I always hoped the Herald could be, which was to build a dominant online presence. Sean McAdams, just about the best baseball writer Boston's ever had, is now working for Mass Live with Chris Cotillo and
Karen.
and Chris Smith. And Chris and Karen is heading up their football coverage. They do a really, really good job. And they also cover the State House and news and stuff like that. So, and that's basically an offshoot of the old Springfield Union and Republican. And we remember the late, great Gary Brown writing for them for years, and Gene McCormick on hockey and so forth. But I think these outlets can survive if they keep investing in their online presence. And The Globe is still around, the Herald is still around, and if you want to consider Mass Live a descendant of the old Springfield Union, then you can do that. That's what it's going to take. You have to build that online presence, and I still hope that for the rest of my years, every single morning I can go to those places and get my news because I trust them. It is, I may not trust any individual story, but in the general sense, I like going there, and also the Times and the Washington Post.
Hey, let me get a good plug in here for a guy who watches TV and reads newspapers every day, George Gray. If you're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know George Gray will treat you right. They're a family-owned and operated dealership that we trust and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, George Gray, at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington, which is not that far from North Cambridge, where our guest today hails from. And he did go to Cambridge Latin School.
Cambridge High in Latin.
What's that?
Cambridge High in Latin.
Cambridge High in Latin, yes. I can still remember Gene Walcott and Kevin Clark playing basketball at the old Tech Tourney in the Garden, and they were good.
Caitlin Clark, Mike. Caitlin Clark.
The Caitlin Clark has now succeeded Kevin Clark.
Oh, right. All right.
Are we ever going to see Caitlin Clark around here? I mean, will there be a franchise in Boston?
No, the Celtics don't want to. That would be a logical place for the Celtics to invest in a team. And I did a piece several years ago for the Athletic, and I got a very cursory. Well, we support the Connecticut team as our Boston team, and then Mike Silverman wrote a piece in the Globe. Got the same statement. They just changed a few of the words around, and it would take somebody with deep pockets that has a keen interest in basketball. God knows, Wick and Steve Pagliuca have been great guardians of the franchise. They've done wonderful things. I remember interviewing both of them. I remember Wick saying that when he took over the Celtics, he made everyone get Celtics T-shirts. So they went out to lunch. They were selling the product. And they personally got on a plane and went down to Red's apartment in D.C. And it was, it asked for the Godfather's blessings, so they could sell olive oil. And Red gave them his blessing, and they went to work from there. And they've been fantastic owners. But I think one of the blind spots is I think that there could be a women's and a WNBA team in Boston.
Well, Mr. World Team Tennis front row seat Bob Kraft could pick up the WNBA. I mean, if you build a soccer stadium in Everett, wherever it's going to be, then you could combine it with a basketball arena as well. Just
I was doing research on Robert Kraft for a story I was doing several years ago, and I researched his ownership with the Lobsters, with the owner of Boston Volvo, Ray Colella, I forget his name, and one of the first mentions I ever saw of Bob Kraft in the Robert Kraft in the sports page, they spelled his name C-R-A-F-T. So just a small headline.
All right, but as we do, and without dating the show, which will be dated by the time tomorrow morning comes around, and the information I'm going to tell you with both of our teams 3-1 now, Bruins and Celtics. Who do you think is going to move on, and who's not going to move on? Are they both going to move on? Or are they both not going to move on? And then
I'm comfortable saying they're both going to move on.
I mean to the end. I mean, how comfortable are you saying?
Well, I mean, Porzingis is the wild card here. I think they might have a tough time with the big guy in Denver if they don't have him in the paint. But that's not exactly a clever commentary by me. I think a lot of people feel that way. But even so, I think that the Celtics probably have more. I think the Bruins have done much better than anybody thought they would in the post-Bergie, post-Krejci era, at least ways the way I see it. And not saying that we'll all be applauding if they lose in the playoffs, but they've had a fine season. I think Montgomery deserves to return, but I think if I'm sitting here now, the Celtics go further.
All right, I have to before we go, Bob, Buck. I got to tell everybody the story once again.
I know where you're going with this.
So I'm
Go
going
ahead.
to spring training, and I'm sitting in like row 20. And Buck comes walking down from the front of the plane, and we're about 2 hours into the flight. He looks down at me and goes, "Hey, have you been here the whole time?" I said, "No, I got airlifted in over Charlotte." And, you know, but that was one of Buck's great lines of all time. Have you been here the entire time?
And I'm embarrassed to say that story is 100% accurate. And I'll tell you one real quick. I know you're going to go, but at the wake for the late great Johnny Pesky, who we all loved, and I remember being in line at the wake on a very hot, muggy day, and you and Lynchy and me are standing next to each other. We're like seventh and eighth in line, and there's this great big line going way down the hall and outstairs and down. But we look way in the back. And I say, "Oh, look, there's Milt Schmidt. Isn't that nice that Milt Schmidt is here?" Because, they used to play hockey together. Pesky used to work out with the Bruins. He was a big hockey player growing up in Oregon. And I said, "Isn't that great that Milt Schmidt is here?" It never occurred to me to do what Lynchy did. This is the Harvard boy at play. He says, "Well, he shouldn't be waiting in line." And Lynchy walks back and escorts Milt right up to the front. I don't know if you remember, the Cardinal was there,
Yep.
Cardinal O'Malley. And me, I'm saying, "Oh, isn't that great? 94-year-old Milt Schmidt is here." But you were the one that took the initiative that this poor old man shouldn't be. And he's a humble guy, humility, and he didn't feel it was his place to cut in line. But you took the initiative, and I give you credit for that. Once again, Buck was the blockhead.
Well, Mike, I'm so proud of you. Good job, Buck.
It's a pleasure, gentlemen.
Buck, awesome as always. Come back
It
and
was
visit us
fun.
again sometime, right?
Thank you. Anytime.
All right.
Good job. It was fun. Great to see you.
All right. Make sure you follow us on anchoredboston.com.